Values are to be lived, not laminated. Because quite often they just take the values, they laminate them as much as they can, they stick them all over the place, but they don't actually act on them. Yeah. So I think it's actually the role of the organization, first of all, to kind of share what their values are, but also hire based on their values as well. So hopefully, if you've gone into an organization before they've checked whether you've got the skills necessary and attitude necessary, are your values actually in alignment with the organization's values? Because your values don't change that much, and if you find yourself in an organization which is mismatching the values of that organization, then it will be hard for you to feel so fulfilled, and maybe you need to find an organization where your values do match.
Mindful Work is the official podcast brought to you by the Mindful Life Mindful Work team. Amidst these rapidly changing times, our conversations will explore the intersection of self-awareness and team performance and help you to optimize your efforts through mindful work. On this episode of the Mindful Work podcast, Calvin Niles explores with guests how mindful work connects to mindful values, followed by insights from the Mindful Life Mindful Work team.
Welcome to episode 8 of the Mindful Work podcast. I'm your host, Calvin Niles, one of the team members here at Mindful Life Mindful Work. We hope to support you to develop effective leadership, greater team alignment, real employee commitment, and a company culture that is deeply connected to your mission. In this episode, we will be exploring values. You may remember from episode 2, where I was citing from research from Deloitte, one of the big 4 consultancy houses, Deloitte Insights, talking about the future of work, and actually that many are seeking a lot more from their work than they probably have done historically. And they say that workers are reconsidering everything from who they want to work for, with 40% of the global workforce considering leaving their employer this year, 2021, to the role they expect employers to play in supporting their purpose and values. Likewise, organizations are contemplating their role in society and their relationship with their workers, with some leaning in and others backing away. So today, you'll hear the full conversation between me and Shamash, the best-selling author of Mindfulness for Dummies and Acceptance and Commitment Therapy trainer. But first, as we always do, let us take a mindful pause.
Pausing is so very important. When we pause, it's an acknowledgement that we can always start over. So wherever you are, if you're seated, notice yourself sitting here. If you're walking or standing or laying down, notice those things. I invite you to close your eyes if it feels safe and comfortable to do so. But wherever you are, notice that when you pause, you reset, you start over. You commence, you begin anew, with an acknowledgement to what came before, just like any commencement, but with an eye to innovating and moving forward in some new way, to development, to growth. So we'll pause just for about 30 seconds. Notice yourself here in human form, alive, awake. And hopefully you can carry this flavor or this intention or this way of being throughout the rest of your day and your week and your year. Notice that this is always available to you. You can always pause, you can always reset and begin anew. And it's really important to do that because you've grown, because you've changed from your past experiences. And when we pause, we acknowledge that and we move forward with that new capacity. So again, hopefully you found this helpful. Have a wonderful day of practice.
Welcome back, and thank you for taking that mindful pause with me. And now back to the full conversation that I had with Shamash, Shamash and I also have a separate podcast called Mindful Conversations, where we explore all kinds of subject matter, which serves the ultimate aim of helping people to live happier, richer, and more meaningful lives. But here, we are focused very specifically on values in the workplace and how personal values are integral to value alignment at work. Here's the conversation. Hello and welcome to this new episode of the Mindful Work podcast. I'm already laughing because I'm here with my good friend and mindfulness teacher, Shamash Aladina, the author of Mindfulness for Dummies. Just an all-round cool dude and a good friend of mine who we go back some time. So I'm just delighted to have Shamash here to investigate this thing called mindful work and what that means. Shamash, welcome. Good to have you. Good to catch up with you again.
Thank you. So good to be with you. Always like to have conversations with you. So thanks so much for inviting me to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're both actually in the same time zone, which makes a bit of a change for all these global conversations I've been having. So we're both experiencing the same heat, which is good.
Relatively speaking. It's all relative, which links to our conversation. But yeah, 20 degrees here today. All right. Really hot. But I don't think it's that. Yeah, I think it's only Fahrenheit. No, Celsius.
Well, Shamash, I guess where we could start is what does working mindfully mean to you?
Okay, back to the essence and the basics. Well, I would like to kind of lean this conversation not towards the general definition of mindfulness or mindfulness from the context of, maybe people have done 8-week courses in mindfulness, for example. But my speciality is leaning more towards acceptance and commitment training, or acceptance and commitment therapy. And from that context, there's actually 4 different aspects of mindfulness. So I'd like to share that first of all, and then we can think about how it would link to the workplace. So the 4, the first one is acceptance or allowing. So it's about making space. That's another way of defining that. So it's about making space for our internal thoughts and our internal feelings. So the first aspect of mindful work is, can we make space for the difficult thoughts and the difficult feelings that can come up in our normal everyday working lives? First of all, the computer not working or technology not working, or even more challenging, the relationships and struggling with the relationships that we have in the workplace. Can we make space for those difficult thoughts and feelings without immediately reacting with them? So I would say that's the first step of mindful work. The second aspect of the definition of mindfulness from an ACT perspective is being able to unhook from our thoughts. So, thoughts like we may have a certain limiting belief about what we can achieve in the workplace. Like, oh, I can't give this talk, or I can't do this workshop, or I can't achieve those sales, or I can't create a product that good, just from our own limiting beliefs, and not having that flexibility of mindset of being able to think that actually that's just a thought. It might be true, it may not be true, but how can I step back from that thought and yet still have another go at this, or think about it from another perspective? So that's the second aspect of mindfulness. The third one is really interesting one for me, which is about what is called the transcendent self, or observing self, or on a more simple level, just being able to see things from different perspectives. So the ability to, see things from a colleague's perspective, to see things from a customer or client's perspective, and also from, our own perspective in a compassionate way as well. So that's the third element of mindfulness, and how we can be mindful in the workplace, having a more flexible sense of who we are and being able to see things from different perspectives. And finally, the last one, which is the one which most people think about when they first think about mindfulness, is actually being in the here and now, being present with what we're doing, rather than having our mind wandering off to past and future so much. And actually not just wandering from past or future, but being deliberate. So if we do need to reflect on a past thing that we did that may have gone wrong, or we need to reflect or plan for the future, we do it, but we can do it in a way that's we're consciously choosing to do it rather than being just wandering from past to future as it would do naturally, I guess, if we didn't cultivate any mindful skills. So being able to, you know, work in a mindful way for me is about cultivating those four skills. And nobody's perfect in being able to do this, but to start being aware of opportunities to develop those skills, whether it's through doing mindful meditations or just mindful exercises or being present in different ways. That for me, actually, at least on the individual level, is what it means to be mindful in the way that we work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This part about being present, being able to act in the present moment, I guess helps us to be more intentional, but also does it give us opportunity to work better? Where are the benefits out of that when we're working with this degree of presence, let's say?
Um, Well, just one idea that's popping into my head is, let's say if you work in an industrial context where you're working with machinery, that's the most obvious thought that comes to my mind. But if you're not there, or you're looking at your phone, or you're not paying attention, then whatever you're driving or whatever machinery you're using, it could be actually be dangerous. So there's a safety perspective there. But then, secondly, this is where it gets really interesting, and I love reading about Toyota and many other companies' approach to improvement, Kaizen approach, where each worker is empowered to think about how could they do this piece of work more effectively, how could they do it more efficiently, how could they do it more productively, how could they make it easier for themselves. So that sense of taking responsibility for what they're doing makes them much more engaged. And so I explained these first four aspects that are like core definition of mindfulness. But the nice thing about ACT links well with what you asked there about intention, which is how do we link our work to our values to make it more meaningful? Um, Most people are not so clear about their values, or our values are changing all the time. We don't reflect on our values so much. So being a bit clearer about what our values are and thinking about how is the work that I'm doing making the world a better place, and hopefully it is. And if it's not, then how can I change to do my work so it's something that's meaningful for me and makes a difference in the world as well. And it could be all sorts of work, and it could be the tiniest ways. You could be working in you could be working in something as simple, wherever it may be. It could be an everyday place like a bus or the supermarket or wherever. There's an opportunity to do that work in a meaningful way if you're bringing your values into it. Are you bringing kindness? Are you bringing curiosity? Maybe it's playfulness. Maybe it's helping people to feel a little bit better, cheering them up. So bringing those values in to the activities we do is an interesting angle of mindfulness, I think, as well, which is
Yeah,
also
yeah.
important.
And I know we talk about values and stuff a lot in in our own work together. Um, but you just mentioned something there. We said like sometimes our values change a lot and things like that. How often should somebody be reflecting on their values? How often is a good time? At what regular interval or frequency is it good for us to maybe stop and sort of take stock and say, well, is this still one of the most important values for me? And also alignment. Like, how do we know when we're not in alignment from a values point of view?
Yeah. Um, well, I would say if you've never considered what your values are, then you need to do it at least once. But if you have done it, if you have had the chance to reflect on your values or worked with someone to help support you with that, then I think annually is quite a nice time to do it. Like, come January, it's a lovely time. A lot of people reflect about their goals, but how often do people think in terms of New Year resolutions? What about New Year values? That actually, what is really important to me? What are my values? One exercise that someone shared with me is to think about their year ahead and think about what's their one word focus. And it could be something like curiosity or playfulness or kindness, but it's quite often a value that we have in the background, but we're not really fulfilling it. And therefore, one aspect of our life at least has a little bit less meaning there. So annually, I think is a good one. But also when we go through a big change, when there's some big change in relationship, a big change in the workplace, maybe some challenge in our health has happened. At that point, something you may have had some insight that makes you think, hang on a minute, I've been pursuing just financial goals because I thought that was really important. But actually, there's something more to life. There's something else deeper that I need to reflect on, and maybe I don't value just material gains, and I also maybe the particular relationship is also very important to me, or maybe I need to spend less time at work and a bit more time looking after my own health, because if I don't have my health, then I won't be able to do anything. So I've seen that certainly with friends and family, and also in myself when we meet these big challenges. I think sometimes you get these value shifts happening. But generally speaking, values don't change as much as things like
Yeah,
our everyday
yeah.
goals, of course.
It's interesting because one of the things I've been looking at as part of this show is, the different aspects of work and how people would be either going for, a work that tends to be, so let's say environmentally focused, or something that's more meaning based and improving
Yeah.
the world, or, something more technologically innovation based. And this is thought leadership by different consultancy houses and what have you. But from just a point of view of just intellectual exploration, just discussing it, would you
Mm.
say that if a company's values, let's say, are declared, which many of them are, especially if they're a large organization, would you say that it's important that somebody checks whether their personal values are in alignment with their declared values, or is it more about what they observe? Is the company's lived values, if you like, more important?
Yes. Yeah, reminds me of a quote: "Values are to be lived, not laminated." Because quite often they just take the values, they laminate them as much as they can, they stick them all over the place, but they don't actually act on them. Yeah, so I think it's actually the role of the organization, first of all, to kind of share what their values are, but also hire based on their values as well. So hopefully, if you've gone into an organization before they've checked whether you've got the skills necessary and attitude necessary, are your values actually in alignment with the organization's values? Because your values don't change that much, and if you find yourself in an organization which is mismatching the values of that organization, then it will be hard for you to feel so fulfilled, and maybe you need to find an organization where your values do match the company's values more, because that mismatch can feel very frustrating. You can feel disengaged. um, I know companies such as Zappos, I think Amazon and some other companies as well, they actually offer payment to staff to leave if they want to leave, because they think that if there's a mismatch in values, it'd be better for that person not to be working there, and we'll give them money to go off somewhere else rather than forcing them to stay there. um, and Zappos is quite famous for being clear about their core values, and then hiring for values first, even if they really need someone and technically they're brilliant to fit the role. If there's a values mismatch, there's going to be it's going to challenge the culture of the organization. So, yeah, it's the role of the leader and the organization, first of all, that the values
Yeah,
matching, in my
yeah.
opinion.
And how does mindfulness help to bring that value alignment or value awareness, maybe?
Yeah. Um, when we actually open up to our values, it's actually a bit of an emotional, or a lot of an emotional experience. um if a coach or a therapist is working with someone and they are opening up to their own values, or sharing how they're not fulfilling their values, often tears can be coming. So it's not an easy thing to open up to, especially if you've spent your life blocking yourself from what's really important to you or what's really meaningful for you. So it requires a degree of mindfulness and courage, actually, to be able to look inwards and say, you know what really matters to me is creating a world that's kinder. And this place of work that I'm in at the moment, or the situation I'm in at the moment, I feel is not actually creating a kinder place. It's doing the opposite. And so, I need to change things, which is scary, right? Especially if you've spent years or time or effort going in one direction, and you've actually, because for whatever reason, maybe you needed to do it at the time, but you kind of closed your heart to what was really important for you, and then suddenly you find yourself in a position where, hang on a minute, this is not right. This is not aligning up with what's meaningful for me. I need to change, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be a bit of an uphill journey. Making that decision is difficult, but the mindfulness can help us to give the courage to look inwards and to think, actually, no, I need to be honest with myself. I've got this one life, and this is what's important to me. So I need to turn and walk in that direction, and that will be a more meaningful direction for me. Um, in our podcast, we discovered, kind of explored this quite a lot when we kind of talked about the storytelling journey and ACT, and we reflected about values, and how the hero's journey. When a person is going on a hero's journey, they could be, let's say, there could be a person who's in a certain corporate organization, and a typical focus is they're just focusing financially, and they're very successful. They're moving up the organization, but there's something inside them telling them, there's a sense of emptiness each time they get promoted. There's a sense of emptiness each time they interact with their colleagues. They get low mood after low mood, and something's missing, and something happens that wakes them up and reminds them, actually, this is not what they really want to do. um, that feeling of pain through the emptiness, or through whatever difficult moods or emotions that you may go through, they can actually be clues that we're not doing something in alignment with our values. And when we are doing something in alignment with our values, it's not so much about the feeling changing, but there's this sense of fulfillment, a sense of purpose, this sense of motivation and energy. And like I said, it may not always be easy. There will still be pain, like we experience with all sorts of different challenges, but it's coming from a place of meaning.
So I was actually going to ask you, what kind of problems can you expect to see in a team or in an organization that's not working mindfully? But I guess we've already answered quite a lot of that just now with, the feeling of lack of fulfillment, the feeling of, I'm not aligned with what my organization is doing, these kinds of challenges. So if we then become more mindful of our values, and we create this space you talked about, how does creating that space help a team to, how does that look? What does a mindful team look like?
Well, I think, first of all, one of the things that ACT measures is a concept that they use is called psychological flexibility. And you can measure that for an individual, and it's based on these 6 elements. I've gone through 5 of them: acceptance, unhooking, transcendent self, being present, being clear about your values. And the 6th one is being able to set goals, which is the one that most companies, that's the one thing they're quite good at and they like doing. Now, a team that's mindful, in my mind, is a team that is also psychologically flexible. So a psychologically flexible team, which you'd be able to measure, or at least get a sense of, would be not just looking for positives. First of all, they would be open to criticisms from each other. They would be open to criticisms from customers, from the higher leaders. There wouldn't be this automatic, just need to feed each other positive signals all the time. They have the inner flexibility to be able to open up to, hey, this project has gone wrong, or we've been working on this way of solving this problem for 4 months, and this could go on for 4 years because we're going in the wrong direction. We need to just let that go and go in a different direction. So that's what that team would look like. They would be willing to share how they're feeling with each other. And that would actually improve the quality of the communication that they have with each other. There'd be great levels of empathy and compassion. So the discussion would not just stick to what's happening in the workplace, but checking in with people's personal lives and seeing how they're doing, making sure they're okay in a reasonable fashion. And people wouldn't have this rigid sense of who they are and what they're able to achieve. There would be this constant flexibility and movement. And if there's someone in the team that doesn't feel like they're gelling or connecting well, they would have conversations, and they would have the opportunity to move around or move in a different team or change their responsibility or role. And I think they would be open to continuously learning as well. Like, no matter where they get to, there's the opportunity to continue to grow and improve and to change. And so being willing to do that, willing to invest their time and their money to keep learning and keep growing and find out new ways of doing what they're doing, no matter how well things seem to be going. And the team as a whole hopefully would be creating products or services that are meaningful for them and make the world a better place. I think that is a mindful team as well. And then the goal setting is the last part of it as well that we've mentioned as well. So I would say a mindful team, a successful mindful team, is a psychologically flexible one, where it can make space for difficult thoughts and feelings, and yet be clear about what its values are and keep taking action to move towards the goals that are in line with those values.
I mean, man, there's a reason why we're good friends, mate. I love all of it. I love this. I'm just going. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I guess I'm just wondering, like, I'm at work. I feel misaligned, and then I'm investigating this source of misalignment. Now, mindfulness is helping me, because certainly for me, when I started practicing mindfulness and I started to use this level of awareness, this description of psychological flexibility inherently makes sense to me, that my relationship with a lot of these ideas start to change. I'm trying to understand if actually I'm just reflecting on myself right now, whether any new values became present. Is there anything such as new values, or is it the values are just always there, but we're just not aware that they're there?
Well, interestingly, it's not about just getting your one value or two value or three values. It actually links to different domains, first of all. So, in the workplace, your value may be about continuing to improve what you're doing. Maybe that's your value. And then in relationships, your value may be to do with being kind to others, being kind to yourself. So the values would be different in different domains. And you can't always fulfill all your values at the same time, because
Some might be in
the work
conflict.
you may want to do great
Yeah.
work. Yeah, you get conflict. Exactly, that's a good word. You get conflict between those values. So there's a balancing act to be had. Like, you want to be successful at work, but if you just spend all your time at work, then you wouldn't be fulfilling the values of bringing up your family effectively too. So you need to balance those values. And also, it's an ongoing learning process. It's not like you've worked out what your values are, that's it, you're done. How can you? How can you? It's like a value. A nice metaphor for a value is a direction, like
Yeah.
north. So you never get to north. You can keep traveling north. I guess when you get to the North Pole, you've got north, but you can still going in that northerly direction. Keep going in that direction. And so, although the value may be clear to you, you may have got to that stage. There's an infinite number of different ways in which you can fulfill it. So, if you love living curiously, you never finish being curious. There's obviously an ongoing way in which you can cultivate that curiosity through continually learning and growing and developing. And that's the beauty of values, because they cannot be reached at a certain point. And there's a humility that comes with it as well. It's like, you never get done with your values. An organization never finishes fulfilling its values, so it can continue
Yeah.
stepping in that direction. So they're really interesting, and it's nice to continue to reflect on what our values are. You can reflect on it every day, and if you're not too sure, if you're quite confused about your values, don't feel like it's some very big thing. And then once you've worked it out, that's it. You could just think, let me try it out. Let me pick a certain value. Let me try it out for a week and do actions that are in alignment with a certain value, and see if I find them fulfilling or not. And if you do, that's a good sign. Like, if you think, I'm not sure if creativity is my value. I used to do some painting, but maybe I'm not sure if it's my value or not. Let me try doing a little bit of painting once a week for the next month. You try it out, see how it makes you feel, and if it feels fulfilling, if it feels uplifting, then there's an example of that. And then you can apply it in the different areas. You can apply creativity in the work that you do, or creativity in your relationships, or creativity in the way you exercise, or things like that. So it's quite fun to apply it to those different domains as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I think this is a really rich vein here because we talk about values a lot in our conversations. We talk about how it relates to the stories we tell ourselves and others. We do all of these kind of things, and probably helpful maybe to one of the ways I always like to close off this conversation is to ask the guests if they could share with the listeners, if there's one thing they could do to work more mindfully immediately.
Mm.
So, I mean, you're more than welcome to share something related to values or anything really. But if you were to give us a tip, of what we can do to
Mm.
work right away, something we could apply pretty much straight away to our work, to be more mindfully
Mm.
work more mindfully, what would that be?
Well, since we've been talking a lot about values, here's a little mini values exercise that perhaps people could do, which they may not have done. So, a nice quote that's often used in ACT is, "We hurt where we care," or "Where there is pain, on the flip side of that is purpose." So, think about an area of your life or an experience in the past which has been difficult for you, painful for you. Maybe it was something in the workplace, and think about what value was being challenged. Okay. So let's say you did a piece of work and it wasn't acknowledged, for example, or somebody else got credit for it, and you got really annoyed or really angry or really frustrated about that. Then what value was not being fulfilled there? And fairness or justice was being challenged. So you can flip what hurt you, and it actually shows you really care about fairness, you care about justice. And maybe you can then think about, okay, what can I do to bring more fairness into the workplace? How can I bring a bit more justice into the workplace? And think about a small action that you could do today or now, as you said, that is taking a step to make the workplace a fairer place. And this is just an example of a value. Um, but think about, for each person that's listening, think about, where you felt hurt, where you felt pain in the workplace, and think about what value was not being fulfilled. Flip it around and see what action you can take in alignment
Wow,
with that.
that's a good one. I wish I knew this 10 years
So
ago.
interesting.
Oh man, well, Shamash, yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time. Um, we can have another conversation definitely down the line because there's so much more to share about this. But I just want to say, on behalf of the Mindful Life, Mindful Work team, thanks so much. I'm looking forward to continuing to doing stuff with you on a personal level as well. And if there's anything else that you want to add before you go, this is a good opportunity. But just from me, thank you again, and look forward to seeing more of you in the near future.
Yeah, no, just no, thank you very much. I just want to also thank you for your time together on our podcast, our separate podcast that we did, Mindful Conversations. Just to mention a little bit, it was a really interesting series of 12 conversations that we had with all sorts of different specialists, not just me and yourself, and to see that overlap between acceptance and commitment training and the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and to reflect on those 12 steps, and to hear the stories of all these different specialists and how their lives were transformed at those different stages and how that maps on. It's really interesting, and I just think it's an interesting thing to reflect on as well, for people in the workplace, thinking of themselves as going on a hero's journey each time they face a challenge at work, whenever they face a difficulty. How is this challenge not just a problem that's in the way that we need to fix as soon as possible, but how is it part of our overall learning journey, and how does it link to the story that we're telling ourselves? Maybe that's something to explore in the future as well. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting points to talk about.
Okay, well, check us out if you want to hear that. That's at mindfulconvo.com. But obviously, here at Mindful Work Podcast, this brings us to the end of another episode. So look forward to seeing you in our next episode, where we explore some more interesting thematics. If you want to subscribe at mindfulworkpodcast.com. Ask us a question if you have something you want us to answer, and I'll put that to our guests as well. And if you want to find out more about what we do at Mindful Life, Mindful Work, then go to www.mindfullifemindfulwork.com. Bye for now.
Mindful Work is the official podcast brought to you by Mindful Life Mindful Work Incorporated. To learn more about our work, visit www.mindfullifemindfulwork.com.